here. We don't need that anymore. That can go away. Wait for it to pop up.
I'm not going through which 13th round pick was the best and worst.
No, indeed. We'll just scan through the
rounds. There might be a good one in there. You never know. There's something that's worth saying.
Yeah. I haven't actually looked at it yet. We've got the old thing on here. Hopefully we have audio.
I'm not going through which 13th round pick was the best.
We can hear each other on there. Post a group and we can...
There it is.
Go. Yep, you heard it. Come on. There we go. Right. Okay, intro music coming in now.
The whole Liam Kumar Day effect, not really happy.
Nigel couldn't make it.
Yeah.
I rang up Mendenhall, he said he could make it.
Don't dig this whole... Phil, credit to the guy, he always manages to do well what he has to. He is a shocking person on that. You guys got a trophy? No.
It was pre-vim.
No. My life from Rashad Mendenhall.
Right, you go. I'm a tag jack! I'm a fucking tag!
Hello and welcome to the LOC report. Myself and Chris are back from our mid-preseason break. Chris is back from France. How was France, Chris?
That's it. It was very much like it is today.
Boiling, yes.
Every day. Yeah. So, but yes, it's exactly what was needed before the nitty-gritty of everything gets back to it again. So yeah, it's all rested and all good and ready to go today.
Glad to hear it because it's we are starting with a heavy podcast today. We have the 2019 review and best and worst draft picks, which we're going to condense as much as we can. So heavy show today, and then of course it's we'll be running up to the draft in the next few weeks as well, so it's getting to crunch time in that respect as well, and the season will be here. So we won't dilly-dally today, we'll go straight into the league news, and I'm just going to turn down my speakers so I don't deafen you all. Here you go. Hopefully your eardrums are intact, because you need to know that the draft is on the 29th of August. I will firm up the time soon, as we are rapidly approaching. It is less than 3 weeks away now, isn't it, Chris? I believe.
Oh, I know. It's come around again, very quickly, once more. So yes, that's it. Be there.
Yeah.
That's it. You know how I feel about auto-drafted teams. If you don't know, I'm going to tell you again. I don't like them. So you should be there.
Yes, we don't like them, and we like them even less when they actually do well. So please do make sure you attend the draft in whatever fashion we're going to have it. I haven't quite figured that out yet. It may be an all virtual affair, but we will be having it. It will either be in the afternoon or the evening. I can tell you now it will not be in the morning. There is a church football friendly that a quarter of the league will be going to. So
that's true, yeah.
So that's that. Make sure you're able for that. And then myself and Chris were just discussing division aligning event off of air, because obviously we usually have it before this point, but we haven't been able to due to circumstances. We've now agreed what to do. Chris, it is your discretion if you'd like to reveal it now or at a later date.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I want to get people hyped for it. Oh, there we go. I want to get people hyped for it because it's the thing to be hyped for. What I want to do is we want to keep it as interactive as we can. We want to keep it as active as we can. Yeah, but we also want to keep it a bit more social, and we want some sort of competition to it as well. And it took me 2 weeks in France to think about this. But yes, what I was going to do was obviously get everyone together and do a very similar thing that we've done in the past in London. But I think London's a little bit out of the way at the moment, and it's not the thing to really go and do. Hair around London, run around with your mask on, get on the tube and things. It's a bit of a risk. So what we'll do is that in your local area, that's it, wherever you may be, that's it. And we span the globe these days. We span the globe from Bristol to New Zealand. Anywhere in between that. That's it, via Coventry. Or wherever Ollie Gardner lives in Midlands. We want to to explore your local area and get you out in your local area some more. So what we're going to do is an LOC scatter rally. Oh yes. And when you think to myself, what is a scatter rally, Chris? Oh, come on. What is? Well, what that means is that you'll start from a central point, which is your own home, and we'll send you various locations around your local area, whether that be, a body of water, first person to reach a body of water in whatever time it might be, wins a set amount of points, and then whoever comes second, third, fourth, however what it might be, we'll rank you, give you some points, and then there'll be other various fun places that are quite generic in your local area that you've got to go and find for us to go and get some points. So yeah, it's something you can stay at home for pretty much, but at the same time it's something that we can have a bit of crack doing as well. So yeah, we're looking for a date that you can all do. If you are listening to this, which some of you may be, then tell Nathan what day you can do. We can work around that. Obviously we want to do it before the start of our season, so it's the second week in September. But yeah, that's it. If we can do it, then we'll do it. And yeah, even if Ben and I have to do it in Croatia, we'll do it out there, which should be funny.
I was just gonna say, yeah, this is interesting because this year we may actually be doing the division line event possibly after the draft, because our draft is a week forward, and
I think we might, and yeah, that could at least who you're going to be competing against then. So yeah, I think it's a nice idea. It's something that at the moment it'd be lovely to go and do. Get yourself outdoors, and obviously socially distanced. And yeah, you can run around or bike around or drive around looking like a bit of a maniac. While still trying to beat people to some points to get to the first person to get to a park bench. So you're going to look a bit strange, but it's going to be fun. So yeah,
sure.
We'll give it a go.
Sounds good. So yeah, safe, convenient, and fun, all wrapped up in one. What more could you ask for? I'll reach out to all of you. I'll put up a message in the group after the podcast later this evening, something like that, asking you all to confirm what days you can be free. Obviously, hopefully, given that we can all do this from wherever we are, you only need a few hours free on whatever day we do decide it to be. We do all need to do it at the same time. That's the only requirement. Go away, Outlook item.
Happy birthday to her.
I'll put up that later, and then we'll figure all that out and get that set in stone as soon as possible. But today, Chris, we are talking about 2019. Usually we meander a bit about this, split a few pods, but today pretty much all in one, I think, looking back at last year. So we looked back once and then never again, I think, but that's a nice way to be given the circumstances that have surrounded this year. I'm sure you'll agree.
2019, what that was.
Yeah.
Can you remember when it was normal?
Yeah. the old normal, as we call it nowadays. So we'll start off with the best and worst draft picks, because then that naturally leads us quite nicely into the 2019 review. We're not going to read every pick this time around, so this is going to be a much punchier segment, but just as interesting all the same. So looking down here, you can see on the screen round one. Chris can see as well, but we will obviously make sure we portray who we're talking about, and we'll start with Alvin Kamara, who really caught fire in 2018. Didn't have the best of years last year, did he, Chris, for Mike's first pick in his team history. Though it has come out that not only did he have that high ankle sprain, he also apparently tore his knee up a bit, which explains last year a bit.
Absolutely, and I think that this is where I'm going to be honest with the viewers. If Alvin Kamara had fallen to me at that point, I would have taken him too, which in hindsight was probably not the best move. But yeah, after that year that he came off in 2018, it was a sure bet that he was going to be okay in a very, very high tempo New Orleans offense. But obviously that didn't happen. We've seen that in the past with running backs, particularly, is that they can't follow their first year dominance with a second year backup, and that was the case here. Would I expect him to bounce back this year for sure? But yeah, he certainly didn't get the value out of the second round pick that perhaps he should have done. The first round pick, second in the first round that he probably should have done.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He was an okay to good player, but certainly did not play up to that second overall pick level. Christian McCaffrey, however, on the flip side of that, he would have been the consensus number one pick if we knew it was going to happen last year. Obviously, carried you. I wouldn't say carried because your team was good apart from him, but he was definitely one of the bigger workhorses in your team last season.
Absolutely, no doubt. And to have sort of lucked into him really, because as I say, I wouldn't have taken him otherwise. If Mike hadn't taken Kamara, I wouldn't have taken McCaffrey. But it's a very good thing that happened. I'd say absolutely he was the stud guy in that draft, and to get him there, was decent value in hindsight.
Definitely. We've got another two guys here, David Johnson, James Conner, picks 4 and 6 for Detonators and Tom's Tyrants. Well, that was all about injury. It happens with these running backs. Yes, you can probably circle those for the two likeliest players in this first round to be injured, but it did happen and they did not pan out. Looking further down, Ezekiel Elliott, in hindsight, great value. If we cast our minds back, as we had to when Ben obviously took him a few years ago when he had that suspension last year, he was in a holdout, I believe, when we had the draft, or he had recently ended his holdout and came back, which was why he slipped to there. So great value for Viv. And then the Devontae Adams pick by Ross here, very interesting case, because had Ross held on to him, you would have said this wouldn't have been the best pick because, again, through injury, nothing against him. But what Ross managed to flip Devontae Adams for with that trade in Pat made it absolutely worthwhile, especially when you consider he got injured. This is probably one of the only picks I will ever say that it could be a contender for best pick of the draft, not because of the player's actual performance himself, but the whole basket of what happened. Yeah,
what afforded to him afterwards. I think that this doesn't happen enough. I think that's maybe because there's not enough willing buyers of trades, perhaps. But yeah, if you can determine a value of someone and that's less than you want, and you think that someone's going to bite because he was a first rounder at some point, then great. That's one thing to look forward to this season, is perhaps to see a bit more of that, because that is what happens in the real world. So perhaps it should translate into ours as well.
For sure. Going to round 2 then, right at the top, Tyreek Hill. He was a good player, again, had that injury. Dalvin Cook, great pick by Ben there, as was Michael Thomas by Ross.
Michael Thomas was the pick of the draft here. I'm sorry, I gotta say, you think about what happened before that, and say for him to go, top of the second round there. The dominant season that he had, that's some very, very good value, based on where he was. Yeah,
for sure. But the opposite side of that, Juju Smith-Schuster to me at 18 didn't quite pan out. He was, flex-ish for most of the season. A lot of that was due to Big Ben going down, though. You have to think. Looking elsewhere, Aaron Jones was a bit boom bust for Ollie, but he did have some great games. Mike Evans to you at 22, though. That he really played well for you, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And towards the end of the season, he was a little bit banged up, and again a little bit boom and bust. But when he was boom, he was off. He was nuclear. I cannot knock that in any way. And so I must admit, really, really pleased with my first 2 picks in this draft. So that's not often the way.
No, certainly not. And Phil here right at the bottom with Patrick Mahomes, first quarterback off the board. Despite having that bum knee for most of the season, he still probably paid off enough for that high investment on a quarterback. Moving to round 3, we have our first lolgasm pick in Antonio Brown to bucking the trend. The less said about that, the better, I think.
It's funny in hindsight. At the time, it was you could sort of understand it, but now...
Yeah, no, just complete car crash. Suspended 8 games this year, but still could play. We'll see on that one. Damian Williams, he was decent in spurts for you, wasn't he, Chris? He didn't last you the whole year on your roster, so...
He didn't, that's right. And I thought I was... And the annoying thing is he came to life in the playoffs, and then Super Bowl, but yes, not in the regular season quite as much, sadly.
Yeah. Nothing else really to massively highlight here. Maybe the last three picks. Josh Jacobs, George Kittle, two great position, I think you can say. You may have frozen, Chris. We'll just give you a second to come back. There we go. You're in.
I'm back. That's it. There's some weird stuff going on. So anyway, I was just saying, Josh Jacobs is another good pick and good value for where he was. Yes, it's a bit of a risk picking a rookie running back at any point in the draft, but I think to this point, you'd think that the number one contender for drafter of the year is Ross so far. Those first three are great.
Yeah, absolutely. And then looking at Pat again, Sony Michel. Just, you know what's going to happen in New England. Running backs are just going to screw you over. Injury did play a part with Michelle, but certainly did not live up to that round 3 grade. Moving to round 4 then, Derrick Henry, absolute smashed out of the park pick there by Ben.
Absolutely. I mean, say, if you want draft value in here, that's it. I mean, I know I was talking about how Michael Thomas was probably the best value we've seen by the second round, but by the 4th round, I don't think we're going to better this. I think Derrick Henry there is, let's be honest here, Pat has overseen Derrick Henry and picked Sony Michel twice.
No, not only Sony Michel, Robert Woods as well. He picked 2 other players before taking Henry, but
that's it. So I don't want to bash Pat here, but I mean, if you wanted a proper running back, that was the way to do it. I bet Ben was thinking all his Christmases had come in August last year, so
yeah. Moving to the back end of the round then, Tyler Lockett was a good value there, I think you'd say, for my dad. James White, though, massively overdrafted in hindsight. He had that one really good season, but outside of that he's really been nothing more than a PPR back.
We overlooked Chris Godwin as well.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin was a good.
He had a good season. Yeah, absolutely.
Really
then we look at another one of Mike's picks here. This started off as a lot.
That's it. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here.
Yeah, neither am I. Mine the stream just dropped for a second as well, but that's okay. We'll press on and hope everything is okay. I think the stream just dropped for a second. Yeah, no, we're back in the room, so we'll just press on. It's neither of our faults, just is what it is. Mark Ingram probably was a great pick there by Phil as well. In that explosive Baltimore offense last season, he did quite well, didn't he?
Yes. I mean, so looking at that, round 4 is where people got their value. I mean, that really is the round that made or break some teams there.
Yeah.
Particularly.
Swiftly moving on to round 5, though, where all dreams were shattered, because Phil followed up a great Mark Ingram pick with a widely laughed at Dede Westbrook pick. Probably the worst pick of the draft. I think we can probably sign, seal, and deliver that right here. Don't you agree?
Yes, I say at that point of the draft, I say why you're picking Dede Westbrook in the 5th. I do not know, but bearing in mind what came after him.
Yeah, Baker not great. T.Y. Hilton really good. Had some injury problems, but when he was on the field, he was good. Mike Williams good. Edelman good. Josh Gordon not so good there, really, was he? Always a tough one.
Not great. No, you don't know where he's going to be every year.
Yeah. Philip Lindsay, he ended up probably being, among my best running backs, which you'll take in the 5th round. But Kenny Golladay, great pick there, as well as Zach Ertz. Tevin Coleman had some good games for Ross as well. Tyler Boyd, though, to Ben, really good pick there. He was an unsung hero, I would say, of that Bengals team last season.
Yeah, well, I said the only flash of any sort of light in that season for the Bengals.
Yeah. And he definitely made some good starts for Ben. Robbie Anderson, bit of a bust pick there by Pat in round 6, but Calvin Ridley, again, Ben and Ross have done the draft well so far. Matt Ryan did Ross pretty good too. DJ Moore, really good pick for me. He was a bit boom busty at times, but he was putting up some solid numbers. And quite funny actually, because I was lamenting between Alshon Jeffrey and Moore. Jeffrey went the pick after and obviously went entirely a different route.
Indeed.
But perhaps even better than both, Allen Robinson, he had a good season to my dad there. It's always mystifying how he seems to fall. It's probably more about his quarterback than anything else, but seems to be a value every year. Will Fuller,
Totally agree.
again, when he was on the field, he was good, but had his injury issues. Cam Newton, we're not going to hit you up for this, Chris. You know, on his day, if he played the whole season, a healthy whole season, he's far exceeding that position, but he just wasn't healthy, as the case was.
No, absolutely, and say, which is partially the reason why the decision to cut and run after week 1.
Yeah.
So yeah, in hindsight, it's not a good one. I've never had a very good experience with Cam Newton. I drafted him twice. First season was the year after the Super Bowl. Real downer. Second season he's injured. So yeah, never again.
No. Speaking of never again, Tariq Cohen probably off of Mike's radar going forward. He had a good season before that, but the whole Chicago offense just had a downtick last season. Kenyon Drake as well. Had he stayed with Phil, would have probably done pretty well, but he didn't have a great start in Miami, and then when he went to Arizona, he was gone off of Phil's team by that point, so we can't comment too much on that one. Chris is gone again, but you will be back, I'm sure, Chris, so we'll carry on. Jarvis Landry was okay. The biggest one here, I think, that we can see, AJ Green did not play a single game. Round 7 was probably about right for where he went in terms of the risk of him not playing and coming back. It didn't pan out, but we can't hit Mike up too much for that. Hunter Henry was a good pick by you, Chris. Sammy Watkins, he had a good week 1, but never really did anything for Ollie. Looking down, Austin Eckler, he paid off big time while Gordon was away for Tom's Tyrants. Again, round 7, you'd probably on balance say he was pretty good. Jared Goff, bit of a disappointment, but a mid-round quarterback there. Marvin Jones had some pretty good games for Ben, so that's a nice value there in the 7th round as well. Moving on to round 8. Hopefully Chris will be rejoining shortly. Curtis Samuel was a burn pick there. Chris has just dropped off of the thing. Chris asks, have I got Sky Broadband? Apologies, this is the issue with doing live podcasting, folks. Chris is going to try and rejoin when he can. I will press on with the best one draft picks. Drew Brees there, not a great draft pick for Ben, though he did wind up doing very well for me. He obviously did break his thumb early on in the season, and Ben did cut him. Jared Cook as well, he didn't survive Russ's roster, but he wound up having a good season for me by the end of it too. Some burn picks here. Darwin Thompson, he was a preseason darling, one of the most hyped sleepers going into last season, but it just not come to fruition. Royce Freeman was a disappointment as well. Devin Singletary, I held on to him for so long, not a good pick for me, but he did wind up having some good games for Ollie Gardner later in the season. Geronimo Allison wasn't great. Matt Breida was, I'd say, pretty good for where he was drafted here. And the other 4 picks down there, not really any good picks at all there. Moving on to round 9, looking at Larry Fitzgerald, the old man. He had a pretty solid season for Phil there at pick 97 overall. Lamar Jackson, though, has to be the standout of this one. You look at Aaron Rodgers, Ollie took him in round 3, that didn't pan out, but if you say, you got Lamar Jackson with the 100th overall pick, it probably goes together as a pretty good pick. This, on his own, though, was an especially good pick. He was obviously electric last season. Nothing else here really that good, apart from Russell Wilson. Everyone continues to put him down, and all he does year after year is perform. Great pick by Ollie Gardner there. And Deshaun Jackson injured, but probably would have paid that off if he'd stayed healthy there for Pat. Moving on, Emmanuel Sanders, great value again for Ross. The aging receiver just keeps going. Ross has had a tremendous draft. It's only wonder how he didn't do better than he did. Tom Brady to Gridiron Gang there at 114. He did pretty good. Kyler Murray as well, he had a good season, but we know Tom did not make the most of him last year, but it was still a good pick on balance, as was Marquise Brown. Is the best receiver for the Ravens, which isn't really saying much last year, but it was still good. Michael Gallup as well, he had a nice season, but unfortunately not for Chris. He did drop him, and he made his way to another team. Chris is back in the room. Hi, Chris.
We have returned.
Good. I like it.
Not sure how we're going to get on with this, but
that's okay. We can hear you just fine. I will pump up the volume just a bit to make sure the listeners can hear you. Thank you for going to extraordinary efforts. As I can only assume you're on a tablet on data right now to rejoin the show.
That's quite alright. We're going with it. We're going with the mobile data. So there we go.
Well, we'll make sure not.
View is the best. There we go.
You're good. You've got a few dots in your face, but that's okay.
Gonna need some headphones, so you have to add a little for me, Nathan.
That's alright. Okay, so we're in round 11. We did a few rounds. We'll continue until Chris has got his headphones on. Looking here, DK Metcalf had a good season, but I think mostly not for the detonators, so we can't credit him with that. Greg Zuerlein was my kicker for all season, so if you're going to draft a kicker slightly high, it's got to pay off, and it did. Josh Allen, great pick by Pakistan here at the end of round 11. He was a great quarterback last year for Pakistan. Moving on to round 12, getting into the stragglers, but you usually see some good picks. John Brown, massively good pick for this time of the draft. Buffalo's number 1 wide receiver, and he played quite a lot for Ben last season too, so good pick there. Going down, mainly just kickers and defenses at this point. Let's take a look at the final round of the draft, round 13. Golden Tate, he had an alright season-ish. Adrian Peterson, I can't remember if he stayed with my dad, but he had some decent games. Carlos Hyde, again, would have been a great pick had I stuck with him, but I cut him after the draft. Ended up lamenting that, and that is the best and worst draft picks part of the show. Chris has his headphones now. I filibustered enough.
Absolutely, yes, there we go. We are back. I can hear you. I can see most of what's happening. So
good.
In that case, we're all largely okay.
Good. Well, you rejoined just in time because I finished reviewing the draft, but we can give our picks for best and worst draft pick just before we go into the 2019 review. I think we're both agreed. D.D. Westbrook, worst draft pick of the draft.
So far, yeah, that's it, absolutely. I think that to get him in the 5th round, or to attempt to get him in the 5th round, and then subsequently drop him when you realise that he's just reverts back to just a Jags receiver, then yeah. And then best, well, I think that Derrick Henry in the 4th is great. I mean, bearing in mind how many other people overlooked him, myself included.
Yep.
That Ben found that value that no one else really did. I think that's great. I think Chris Goldman down there is great as well. Again, receiver that came out of the blue, really. Bearing in mind that he was start of the season really as Evans is number 2, and then perhaps was 1 equal by the end of the year. So yeah, and even Michael Thomas in the 2nd round. Think about all those 1st round picks that went before, and yeah, they could have had the number 1 receiver in all that time. So yeah, but I think pure value alone, that was pretty good there. Derrick Henry. And also, whoever picked Russell Wilson up, I remember he went in a very, very late round.
Yep.
His value.
Ollie Gardner got him in round 10 or 11, I think. It was in pick 100 something. I highlighted that. Yeah.
That to me is absurd. So yeah, I think maybe for the first half of the draft, best one is Derrick Henry. Second half of the draft, it's absolutely Russell Wilson for sure. There's no one else who got to anywhere near his level of points in that second half of the draft, for sure.
For sure. I couldn't agree more with those two. My best pick, however, I'm going for it. It's that pick by Ross of Devontae Adams in the 1st round. Because not only did he have a couple of good games, a few good games for Ross before he got injured, Ross then traded him for 3 productive players in Robert Woods, Sony Michel, Miles Sanders, really filling out his team. And then, you get all that value and then you trade a guy away and he gets injured. It's just a very unique pick for me, where not only was he wasn't exceeding his draft pedigree with his performances. He was matching it, but then to trade him away at the great time, you look at the value gained by that trade compared to what it would have been had Ross kept him, and it just makes that a great pick to get 3 players that started on Ross's team quite a lot through the season. Just a good pick from my point of view.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's the best and worst draft picks. That leads us in nicely to the 2019 review. We'll spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about each team, I think, and then any other general last season stuff. So we'll start at the bottom with my team, 3-11. Not the best of seasons. My team did concede a fair amount, but also on the other side of it, didn't put many points forward. Just a bit of a disappointing year for Gridiron Gang last year, wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, sorry, I'm very
It's okay.
all over the place here. It's in my attempt to read what's on the screen.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's probably not easy to see.
Sorry, viewers. That's it. No, I'll be honest here. It wasn't a great year for you. It started off pretty badly and didn't get much better. It was a bit of an improvement on some years gone by. But at the same time, did everything click into place for you this year? Not quite. It's a down year for Brady. Hello. and largely a down year for a lot of the guys in there. So yeah, I mean, improvement to be made for next year perhaps, but yeah. But there was certainly nothing you could do in the draft. It was a straight down the line, middle of the road draft, but just unfortunately didn't quite have the spark that created the fire.
Yeah, indeed. You Are Gold coming in at the 11th spot. We know they did the kicking carousel last year, which obviously doesn't have too much of an impact on the team. But 5-9 record. If we look down his season, here we go. You Are Gold on the schedule. He started pretty well, went 2-1, but then had a raft of losses. He did put up some good points through the season, 1,225. He also scored on a ton. I believe he led highest points against last season. He did, which obviously, as we know, Chris, is a massive factor in a season. If we can probably open up his team here. Hold up, let's open up his team. But we know I think he had some bears, didn't he? Even though he had Russell Wilson, that wasn't enough to overcome all the issues. Here we go. We've got his final season roster. He had some injuries. Julio Jones went through that crazy long stretch of not scoring a single touchdown. Odell Beckham disappointed. So it was just a few disappointments, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's a few names in there that you'd expect to do more. Obviously, you had Golladay, which was great. And did he have Devin Singletary at the end of the year as well?
Yeah, he picked him up off the waivers at the right time. Yep.
See, this is the thing, I think that if that roster goes into next year, he's got much more of a chance, because you look at Montgomery, he's obviously going to improve. You look at guys like Russell Wilson, like Golladay, like Singletary. They're going to be first team starters next year. Julio's in there. So yeah, I think on paper, that team would have expected to do an awful lot better than it did. However, just again, some names that you'd expect to carry them through some weeks simply didn't.
Absolutely, yeah. Pakistan in 10th place here, but everything kind of gets squashed a bit because even with Ollie at 5-9, Pat's 6-8, so the difference between the 10th spot and I think at least 6th, 5th, I can see, difference between 10th and 5th was 1 win. 6-8, lots of 6-8s and 7-7s last year. Pat had an alright year. That trade was the big thing that sunk Pat's season last year, wasn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I would say in hindsight, it maybe wasn't a clever thing to do, but then again, if you can predict the future and know when people are going to get injured, then I suppose then we'd all be in a better position. Indeed,
yeah.
So he thought he was getting the player that was going to save his season. In fact, it was one that ruined it, or certainly stalled it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you look at him and Viv's team, they went hand in hand throughout the most of the season. They had a similar record, I think, until the last week where Viv outscored him. And similarly in that division as well, obviously we got Mike as well. I think that Pat may feel a little bit hard done by, bearing in mind that he did have some players in that team which did have the chance to be able to pull him out of the mire at certain times. As you say, Josh Allen was great. Whenever you got a team with Tyreek on it, it's always going to be explosive when he's not injured. Can we talk about Terry McLaurin for a minute, who was one of the
great pickup?
Waiver wire pickups last year. I think there was certainly room for Pat to do well. If I was looking at that team objectively, I said you're probably missing a receiver, and that receiver is the number one pick in the receivers in the draft, Devontae Adams. So unlucky is all I can say for that.
Yeah, injuries were the story of Pat's season. He didn't have a great start, didn't top 100 points until week 10, and that is when he obviously had Adams and held back by that point. But 3 losses out the gate, which forced him to do that trade, which then created more problems obviously for him. Just an unfortunate year for Pat last year. Looking at the 9th, then we've got Tom's Tyrants there, also at 6 and 8. Let's bring up Tom's Tyrants team. Another classic Tom's team where Tom kind of has this, he either smashes it or it just kind of falls by the wayside, and it fall away it did. He had some really nice picks as we went through the draft with Chris Godwin, Chris Carson and things like that, but then guys like Alshon Jeffrey, James Conner, it was just a bit of a mixed bag really, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so you'd expect those guys to do a little bit better. Obviously, Connor's injuries and lack of a decent QB as well. The ability to stay on the field was a big factor in his decline over the course of the season. And yes, as you say, I think also Tom was a little bit down. In fact, lack of a QB.
That was a big part of it. Yeah.
For the course of the year.
Yeah.
That's it. Onwards and upwards. Every time that he's drafted a QB late down, he hasn't ever fared well. I remember the year he drafted Eli Manning, long way down. Didn't do so well. So it's perhaps a thing to look at in the draft to see if he picks one up a little bit sooner this year.
Yeah, indeed. He did take Kyler Murray this year, which had he actually commit to him and played him, probably would have done quite well, and may have given Tom a bit of a better chance come playoff time. In terms of getting there, but it's always hard trusting rookie quarterbacks. That Arizona offense was not one you would look and say was necessarily, rookie quarterback friendly. So you understand why Tom couldn't trust him, and he wasn't able to find another option that he could trust either. And you're right, that's kind of where he fell short last season. Looking then at the 8th spot, the team that finished in 8th was Bare Necessities last year. Another, I guess you could say, typical Bare Necessities season. They're usually in and around the hunt, but have typically fallen short in previous years. If we look at the team of my dad, again, he's got Deshaun Watson, who was good, and Tyler Lockett, Nick Chubb, 3 great foundation pieces, and really, it's a really good roster. It's how did this team not do better when you look at the starting lineup there?
This is what I've been saying for the last God knows how long since the end of last season, is that this team was not an 8th place finisher. I think that he was unlucky what division he was in, and I think that if he'd have been in the top division, the Tom Sturridge, Mike's team, that gaggle of folk up there, he might the season may have been better. He might have been up a few, 3 or 4 places more perhaps. The problem was that he was in a division with 2 reasonably high-scoring teams in mine and Ross's. He had some heartbreaking defeats. We had one to Wally with Lamar went mental for 50 points on a Monday. There are wins there that you definitely can see him picking up in hindsight. And say the draft was solid, the roster was solid, the waivers were solid, everything was solid, except perhaps the luck, and that's why we've brought in a new rule for next year because of that. Because undoubtedly there will be another team that does a very similar thing at some other time in history. So, unlucky for Dave. I think he was definitely a top half finisher in another division for sure.
Yeah, you're right. And so when the NFL moves their, to the extra game in their schedule, which should be to the 2021 season, we will obviously do the same, and it will kind of correct these errors. My dad's team did go well out of the gate. He went 4-1 in the first 5 weeks, only losing to you in week 1, Chris, by 6 points in a close, good scoring game. But then, it's coming back to me now. He went on that epic losing streak from week 6 all the way up until week 13, by which point it was far too late to make any difference. And in that span, there were a couple of good games, but really not good enough. Just sometimes you get in a bit of a bad rut with team selection and everything, and it just doesn't go your way, and that's exactly what happened with my dad's team last year. Looking at bucking the trend then, the Gypsy King, as we now know, lowest points forward, not even close. The only one of 2 teams to score less than 1,200 points, and he only got 1,056. Also conceded the lowest, yet still only 7-7. If we take a look down at the schedule, it's going to be ugly in terms of points forward, and we went through the best and worst draft picks. We know there were 3 players that were crucial to the lack of success in Mike's season, but we do also know that, to Mike's credit, he did pick up a few good players along the way as well, which kind of led him to that somehow middle ground of 7-7. You look at the scores there, not one 100-point game until week 13, barely even topping 80 points a week, let alone 90. Just
Yeah, I mean, there have been worse teams in the league that have been worse teams in the league. There haven't been that many. There have been better teams in the league that have been for worse records than 7-7. And almost certainly that's because of the division he was in. And the luck that he encountered along the way, which was an absurd amount. But credit to Mike, he did, halfway through the year, did get the waiver wires and what we're trying to do. He did pick up some decent players. Devontae Parker in there particularly. He did have AJ Brown at one point and then dropped him, which was a good done. In hindsight. But the one player that he saw that no one else did was Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones was the guy that bailed him out sometimes because the rest of his team simply did not. But yeah, I think that had he have not made those changes mid-season, we'd have seen certainly a losing record and perhaps a heavy one. But yeah, between Jones, Parker, and DK Metcalf, they sort of bailed him out the hole.
Yeah, DK Metcalf was another one of those players he picked up that gave him a bit of a boost too. So, yeah, not a bad first season for Mike, going 7-7, all things considered. And then in the 6th spot we have the Dream Team, also 7-7. Middle of the road season for the Dream Team last year. They were a good team, if I remember. At the start they looked good, but then kind of fell away. If we bring up their schedule right here, Dream Team. Sorry, opposite way round. Went out the gate 0-3, then leveled it up to 3-3, and then kind of just alternated as the season went on. So pretty much as average a year as you could say, you can imagine. You could say, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you, this is karma for the auto draft or the
being in Alaska. Yeah.
The room draft. Yes, absolutely. You're not there to put your flair on things. You're going to get a very average team, and that is what happened here. Yes, there were some big bold calls. So obviously Zeke's in there. But other than that, it just didn't really work out. I mean, so Wentz is perennially injured across the course of the year and always misses time for some reason. So, and everything else in there is just a little bit, I don't know. It didn't really sit very well for him. Mixon turned up towards the end of the year when they realised what he was. And yeah, it's just a shame really, because there were some players in there that you'd have had high hopes for going into the year, but not quite the way. But nothing lost, nothing gained. 7-7 record. It's for a reasonable amount of points. Regroup and start again next year. Draft it yourself. And,
yeah.
We'll have a better year.
Indeed. The one thing we can credit Viv with is the Kenyon Drake pickup. He was obviously very good when he was in Arizona. So Yeah. Then we're getting to the top end now. So the 5th place team, the first misser outer of playoffs, if you will, was the Detonators, 7-7. And again, you have to question, how did this team miss out on playoffs, given that they had guys like Lamar Jackson, they had Aaron Jones, who was obviously great in spurts, but not always. It was a very top-heavy team, though, wasn't it, Chris? What was behind for Ollie? It really needed the touch of the free agency, and he just couldn't seem to quite get the key free agent last season.
No, if Mike's season was kicked on by those guys that he picked up, Ollie's was sort of hindered by that, as you say. I think perhaps that he thought he had the players to be able to dig himself out at certain points of the year. I know for a long time he was riding the Green Bay hype train with the two running backs. But yeah, when you've got that sort of, I don't know, brittleness perhaps, in the sense that you rely on running backs to be able to get you your points, not necessarily receivers, so you've got guys like Will Fuller in there who 1 week will score you 20, the next week going to score you 2. I think there's a lot of players like that, and yes, if you're talking about boom and bust teams, and there's always one every year, perhaps this is the one.
Yeah, 1 week 170, the next 84, and the week after 63, then 113, and then back to... Exactly your point, yeah. But then looking at the first of the playoffs teams, the 4th seed, Yumi and Drew Brees, Ross's first playoff appearance since 2009. It was a very good season for Ross, and probably the first we've seen where the coach hasn't really been changing the team a lot since the early years of the league. Ross's roster was very fixed for much of the season. He did change out the starters here and there, but he did not make many free agent adds at all. The trade was probably the biggest boost to him last season, but a good season from Ross all the same.
I think so. I genuinely believe this is the first year that I felt Ross took it 100% seriously. And you can tell the draft was great.
Yeah.
As we just saw, the first 3 or 4 picks absolutely spot on. And when you draft like that, when you draft steadily over the course of those first 3 or 4 picks, you simply don't need to worry too much about picking anybody up, because what he picked up was very solid and very reliable. And yes, and he was threatening at times. So absolutely being in the same division as him, you notice that in the sense that he's got those players who can make all the difference. And yeah, so he had an enviable lineup towards the end of the year that nearly got him across the line. I think that had Josh Jacobs not got injured towards the end of the year, it might have been a bit of a different story for him. Because losing him was a big hole in the team. I think that up to that point, he was one of the star breakout players, not only the NFL but for our league too. So yeah, I think he was a little bit unlucky maybe not to get across the line, but it was great to see him back in the playoffs, and hopefully it'll be the same again next year.
Yeah, indeed. And then the 3rd place team, the Tuckfards, and like we've been saying for years now, can Phil do it in a 12-team league? He's not shown it to this point, and obviously absolutely rattled out of the gate with that terrific start. It looked like he was on course to being one of the great teams of an LOC season, and then it just started to fade away down the stretch. He mustered one more good performance in week 15 against your team, but as we know, it wasn't quite enough. And then there was a lot of speculation that he was obviously going to retire on the back of that heartbreak. Had he beat you, he would have won in the final, but it wasn't to be. But I think you've got to look back and say just a great year, despite how it ended for Phil, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he was desperately unlucky not to win. We've been through time and time again now how his final regular season defeat against Mike set him up for a fall in the playoffs. But I think any team that you can get both Mahomes and Saquon Barkley in the same team and firing, is obviously going to be an advantage to you. Yeah, he was the team to beat for a long time in the season. Yes, he was in a slightly weaker division than maybe some other teams were, but that's pure luck anyway. So that's this time where you can't find a park bench or.
He did put a lot of points forward. I think second most forward points. Not close to you, but still a lot of points. Yeah.
Absolutely right, and let's say it is a lot of points. It's very different from the season previous for him, where he got dumped on a lot. I think that's quite disheartening as well when you're halfway through that. But yeah, to get to that point where you could potentially win, and then just as a heartbreaking defeat with a team that you think can get there is very difficult to take, and I can understand why he was disappointed at the time. However, I have no doubt he's back again next year for some more, or this year for some more, and yeah, he's always a character to have around, and always one that that can compete. So yeah, I look forward to that this year.
Absolutely. And then going on to the semi-finalist, or the second place, I suppose you could say, Iksan. Just another great season for Ben. I think his first regular season title, 10-4 record, which I think is a career best as well. Just more of the same for Ben, and what more can you say?
Not a lot. You can commend his consistency over the years, which is something we looked at earlier on. Back end of last year with our reviews and our Hall of Fame reviews. But yeah, I think at the same time as that team there had everything it needed to win. And it was such a shame that at the end of the season that the wheels fell off the wagon in such a wrong time and in such a spectacular way for him. Obviously, it had been the week previously. He was in the final, absolutely trounced me. He scored 100 points in more games than anybody, I think. So yeah, I really do commend Ben's year. Again, it's something that we see every single year. The draft that he has makes this season, and yeah, he picks up that value and doesn't want to lose. And great. Do I think that he was the best runner-up between him and Phil? It's very close. I think probably Phil had just about the better team, and what was more explosive at times. But Ben certainly trucked along, scoring consistent points, and that's where he gets his results. So yeah, that's it. There'll be no doubt they'll be back again for another good draft and a good season again. And yeah, he's always one to look out for now, isn't he?
Definitely.
Every time we do this.
For sure. I think the one thing you can point to in Ben's last season that he did get critically wrong is he didn't do a good enough job near the end of that season making sure he had some alternatives when Cook and Henry went down. Look, we're never saying you can replace guys like that. You can't. But Ben was, I think, probably negligent in having options to fill in there, and quarterback was also a problem for this team all season long.
Big time.
So that did cost them when it mattered as well. But then we obviously get to your team, Chris, 2-time champion, and it had everything: good drafting, good roster management for the season, good team selection, and it also had that touch of magic that we usually see with title-winning teams in that stream of Brashad Perriman along the way. You absolutely utilised those tight ends last year better than anyone else, it's fair to say, and just an all-around good season for your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was an enjoyable year and one that started well, and yeah, I was surprised to keep the consistency up. Really, as you say, there was some value to be found. In the waivers last year, particularly with tight ends, and I was surprised that people didn't use them quite as much as they did. But yeah, so it was, and sometimes all it takes is a couple of players to be able to ignite your season. And for me, it was Evans and McCaffrey that was able to do that. Dak Prescott through the first maybe 12-13 weeks of the season was also absolutely invaluable. So to be able to pick him up off the waivers after week one, it was worth the investment. But yeah, it's absolutely right. And so for large parts of the year, it was really fun. And yeah, got a little bit touchy towards the end. A little bit nervous at times. But yeah, we got there in the end. Sunday nights are a little bit mundane without this. So I like the competition.
For sure.
But yeah, really good to win again, and yeah, hopefully it'll be as enjoyable again this year.
Definitely. And the only other general thing we can say about last season, it obviously was the first year of the Superflex format, which I think, not everyone loves it, but I think a lot of us liked it. I certainly like the flexibility. It adds another layer to our league, and it makes us different to anyone else. So that was the nice change to look back on from last year. And that's the 2019 review. I should have mentioned in the news section, Hall of Fame voting deadline extended because I'd completely forgotten the deadline had passed and I had only received one set of votes. But I have since actually received some votes during this podcast, so if you haven't submitted them, please do. If you're not sure or confused or anything, just message me, I will explain. We need to get as many votes in as possible, even if you didn't nominate something. But it's nice to recognise achievement. But that's all we've got today. I'm not sure if we'll be back next week. We could probably do a pod. I think we'll be back next week. Yeah, we can do a pod. So we'll be back at some point next week. It won't be on Wednesdays anymore. But that's okay. We will get a podcast to you, whether it be Tuesday or whatever. Chris, thank you for your monumental effort of switching conferencing platforms mid-podcast.
No problem.
And we hope you have a good rest of your week and a good weekend ahead. Please do keep an eye out for the message about dates for Division 1 event, and on the back of that I will also get feelers for what time people would like to do and are available for on draft day as well. But yeah, other than that, have a good weekend and we will catch you next week. Outro music is something I should have queued up while I was talking, but here it is now. Goodbye.
Run! Right, I'll see you.